Now, we also have eavesdropping devices that are made for this purpose. You know, my son is a Chicago police officer, and when he was in the academy, I was talking to him about this problem we had with all these cases where the abusers were bringing devices into the home in order to listen to phone conversations. And I said, I wonder how they do that. And he, this is many years ago, and he said, oh, he starts explaining to me how that works. And I said, oh my God, are they teaching you this in the academy? And he said, no. And he went and got a Radio Shack catalog and brought it back to me. And for at that point in 1995, you could buy a device that would attach to a tape recorder and would allow you to record every conversation made on that phone line. And so let me tell you, yeah, they're still available. Now they're $24.99 at Radio Shack. But let me tell you how to find those. So you have a client who's telling you the only way this person can know this information is that they were overhearing my conversation. How are you going to look for that? You want to look at where the wires come into the house, and you want to follow all of the wiring in the house. And what you're looking for is something that's attached to that wiring. It can be sometimes something that is plugged into a phone jack, so you want to look for the phone jacks and see where they are. You want to be aware of places that are unlikely that you would be looking at, so they have been found behind dressers and behind couches that don't get moved, places like that. Cell phones can also be a big problem when you have a stalker. There is a software program that you can send to a phone that will then send you emails with who this person talked to. Basically give you the call history. It embeds itself on the little SIM card in the back of the phone. And they, just so you know, for those of you who have Blackberries, there's actually a special program just for Blackberry that will get you the SIM information and all of your emails. We also have problems with call histories. In a domestic violence situation where the people are still together, the abuser may be looking at the call history to see who called you, who did you call. But the other problem is that call histories are fairly easy to get. Some programs have them online, so you can register online and get that information. Well, in a domestic violence situation, is it likely that the abuser will know the passwords that the victim likely uses and be able to get online and get those call histories? Yes. There's also something called a spy phone, and this was created by Nokia in order to assist law enforcement officers. So if you're an undercover officer and you're going to go make a drug deal, we all know this from television, what happens. Lift your shirt, we want to see are you wired or not, right? And so what this phone does, the phone looks like a regular phone, there's nothing different about it. It can be actually off and have it with you. You know, everybody has cell phones, so the drug dealer is not going to think anything strange about you having a cell phone, may make you turn it off. But what happens is that somebody can call a special number and that connects that phone and it turns that phone into a microphone. So you can hear everything that takes place around that person anytime you want to call in to get that information. Now again, it was created for law enforcement. It was very expensive. You know, you're not supposed to sell them to anybody but law enforcement. Well, about 3 years ago, they show up on a website. At that point, they were $1,700. Actually $1,800, $1,799, and now you can get them for $700. So we have, problems with people who are in the locker room and somebody uses their cell phone and takes their picture of them nude. We all have problems with privacy because cameras are so very tiny now. I'm doing this training and I'm thinking that these are all really outrageously expensive and who can afford these things. But then I'm thinking, okay, so if you want a deal on something, where do you go? Where do you go? eBay. eBay. So I go on eBay. How much do these things really cost? So this is a mini camera, and you see that there's this tiny little dot in the middle. This is what you can't actually see, but that's the only thing that needs to be visible. Not even the part around that needs to be visible. So it's actually really easy to conceal this thing. And you have a battery attached to it. This is a transmitter, okay? You can be in a car outside and attach this little thing to your laptop and view everything that's going on in that house where these cameras are, okay? So you can get these things already embedded in products, buy them already embedded. You can get them in a VCR that's motion activated. So it looks like a VCR. It only comes on if there's motion in the room and records what's going on as long as there is motion, and then shuts down when that motion is gone. You can get them in a lighter. So for those of us who are old enough to remember those old Zippo lighters, you can actually buy a Zippo lighter that has a camera in it that transmits just like this thing does.
And I'd just like to say a couple of things in conclusion, because this has been, I think, fascinating and terrifying. But there are some things that we need to be aware of moving forward. I think as individuals and as lawyers, we now know that our privacy ship has sailed. We have to be proactive and protective of the details of our personal lives and of our client lives. We've got to warn our loved ones about the dangers here. I think especially little children now, small children are getting on these sites, they're being videoed. They have no concept of predators, because if they're lucky enough to have all the technology that makes it possible for them to be online, they're probably protected children. They're probably children who come from privilege. So I think we all risk being labeled as uncool and or paranoid when we're telling people these things, and when we're telling our clients, be careful, be careful, be careful. But I think it's really our job, and it's part of our legal responsibilities. The second thing I'd like to do is, Jan has mentioned some legislation, and so have I, but there is legislation pending that would enable prosecution of domestic terrorists, whether they are traditional stalkers or cyber stalkers or both. There is movement in this direction, and I'd like us to be proactive in lobbying for that legislation. I think we can help minimize the crime by maximizing the legal protections available. And then the last thing, and I had mentioned this earlier, but if you or someone you know, or a client, or their children, or anyone that comes across your radar has been a victim of this kind of stalking or any form of domestic violence, you really do have to instruct them that they need to be proactive on their own behalf. I think that's one of the hardest things to learn, and I think Jessica sort of alluded to it. Not only are you the victim of this kind of crime, but now you have to manage, to some extent, your own case through the system. You have to keep notes, you have to keep the emails, you have to keep the evidence, you have to be insistent, you have to be, find a lawyer, find the services, go online, and you have to be persistent. And the only good news, I think, in that is that your perseverance, either on behalf of yourself or a client or any victim, will actually make it easier for the next group of victims, and I think you are going to alleviate those who are held captive or would otherwise be held captive by those who are terrorizing them. So there's a really good reason to do it, not just for yourself, but almost as a selfless act. And with that, I'd really like to thank Jan, because the work you're doing is part of that. I mean, this education and this educating the law enforcement officers, which we all know is just the key, because if the police won't pay attention, nobody will. So I'd really like to thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.